Hello, Alien Saint-Hilaire here, and in this video we're going to talk about multi-domain MeshCentral servers. So MeshCentral servers can run in a configuration where they look like multiple servers, but you have one single instance. So you have a single database, a single server, a single external port that you expose to the internet, but then you make it look like you're running many different MeshCentral instances in a single server. So let's take a look at how that works. I'm going to start with the basics using a couple slides. So if you are familiar with MeshCentral, you'll be familiar with the config.json file. This is where you configure all your MeshCentral settings, or most of them. And so you would have the settings section that covers things that are specific to the server, things like what ports to listen on and so on and so forth. And then you have domains, which is different domains. And of course, usually you would have only one, the default one. And the default one is an empty string. So it is the empty string within domains, and then this is where you have your domain settings. So most people will have these settings, and they'll have a single domain with an empty string, and that's the default one. But you can add more. So you can add a second domain here just underneath with an identifier. This identifier has to be obviously unique, and you can't have any special characters. It should be lowercase. That's the preferred way to go. And then you can put in that second domain your own branding, your own titles, anything you want, your own policies, and so on. And of course, these two domains will have different set of users, different device groups, different devices connecting to them, and so on and so forth. So they will look like two different servers. Now, the default domain, the way you access it from the browser is you'll type the default domain name, in this case, for my example here, maindomain.com, and so you would do https maindomain.com, and you would get the web page for the default domain right here. Now, if you want to access the second domain, in this configuration, you would type in the same domain name, so maindomain.com, but then you would put the identifier of the subdomain. So it would be here customer. And then you would see the login page, or once you log in, you would have, a completely different experience here. So that's one way to do it. And usually this is the starter way to do it. But if you wanted to go a little fancier, inside the second domain, you can put a DNS entry, and you can specify a DNS name for the second or third or fourth domain that you have. So don't do that for the primary one, for the default one, but for any other domain except the default, you can put DNS and a DNS name. Now then, what happens is that MeshCentral will no longer accept the /customer. So once you put DNS in the domain, this syntax for accessing the domain doesn't work anymore. Instead, what you do is you access the second domain using the second DNS name that you've set up here. Now, obviously, you need those two DNS names to point to the IP address of the server, but once that's done, when the browser connects to the server, depending on what name it used to resolve the web page, you will see a different web page. So this is what I'm recapping in this slide. You have your DNS. You point the two DNS names to the same public IP address or private IP address that you have for your server. And then when the browser uses one of these two domain names to resolve the IP address, then MeshCentral will present one or the other web page to the user. If you have a reverse proxy, you can do the same thing. Just point the two domain names that you have to the reverse proxy. Make sure the reverse proxy forwards both domain names to your MeshCentral instance in the back, if it's a Docker container or a separate server. And then MeshCentral will see what name has been used and present the right web page. If you are a little bit more advanced with MeshCentral, you will be using identifiers for different objects, whether it's users, device groups, nodes, or user groups, and so on. Just be aware that the identifiers, usually they take the form of user / and the user name, in this case admin. And the // here is because this is the default domain. If you are running another domain, for example, customer in this case, then your user would be user/customer/admin. So that would be the internal identifier for inside MeshCentral for a admin user inside the customer domain. So the identifiers are different, and so there's no mix-up. The user admin inside this customer domain is different than the admin user inside the default domain. They're different identifiers. Same for the other object types. Okay, so that's clear. One last thing I want to mention, and this is a great use of the identifiers we talked just a slide before. In settings, you can put manage cross-domain, and you can set users that are allowed to manage users even if the users are in a different domain. So sometimes it's useful that you want to be administrator on the main domain, but you want to be able to manage users on second, third, fourth domains so that you can see what they're doing and create accounts and stuff like that. So this is the way you would do it. Now, we'll just see an example in a second here of how to do that. I'm going to show a practical example. I have a server running, and the server is running this config.json file. So I have my settings section with my DNS name. In this case, I'm using a private DNS name on my developer network, central.mesh.meshcentral.com. And then I have my default domain with a title, MeshCentral, and I have a secondary domain, devtest, with a title devbox, and that's it. The DNS name here for now is ignored because we have the underscore, and so nothing special here. We are basically running a server with two domains. So let's take a look at how to access this. The first domain will be accessible by just taking this URI. So I put it there on top, and you see the web page, the login page pop up. And I'm going to open a second tab, and I am going to access the same address with dev test as the with /dev test, and you can see the second login page here. So I can log into both. In my case here is just admin. Although this user admin is different than the other user admin, but for speed here, I'm just using the same username for both, but they're different users. And of course, now I see different machines, and everything's different. Like my events are different. Everything is completely different because I am a different domain. Okay, now what I can do is I can uncomment this here, DNS dev test. And so what I want to do is, instead of accessing the domain with /devtest, I'm going to access it through this domain name. So I'm going to stop the server, start it up again. Okay. And now what we're going to see is interesting. This returns a 404, and this returns the default domain page. So the default domain page continued to work, but /devtest doesn't work. And the reason is, of course, we need to change this URI to put this here, devtest/mesh, and then boom, we are now seeing the second domain with this DNS name. So this is very nice because you can basically offer a customer a completely customized user experience. They can basically have like mesh.theircompanyname.com point to your server, and then you set up a second domain, customize it, put their logo on it, and they will have what looks like a completely unique experience for their MeshCentral instance. Okay, so I hope that was clear. One note on Let's Encrypt. If you are using the built-in Let's Encrypt feature, you can set up your emails, and then you can ask Let's Encrypt for both names. So here I can ask for central.mesh.meshcentral.com, which is the name of my primary, and comma, the second name. Now, of course, in order for Let's Encrypt to issue a certificate that includes both names, it needs to verify that you own both names. So you have to make sure that port 80 is forwarded correctly to MeshCentral, and you'll have to make sure that both domain names correctly point to the server so that the validation can happen correctly. But once you have that set up, Let's Encrypt will issue a certificate with both names, and you'll see both certificates, the same certificates show up for both here, but they will work correctly because it's the same certificate, but it will have inside both domain names, so it will work fine. Okay, one last thing I want to show is this manage cross-domain. This allows a user to manage users of a different domain. So here, I'm admin on my default domain, and I have been set to also be a cross-domain manager. So when I click on my users, you'll notice that now I see, normally you would not see this, but I see that I am logged in, and also I see that there's admin logged in on dev test. So this is this guy here. Now if I log out, you'll see, should log out. So yeah, it's logged out here. And then if I of course log back in, I don't think it's live. And the reason it's not live is because normally messages don't cross domains. So this is a little bit of an edge case. But here you can see that I have 2 online users, myself and the second user here. And then I can basically, when I create a new account, I can select what domain I want to create a new account for. Of course, this line here only appears when you're a multi-domain administrator. So what's nice is now I can go and say, I want to create a new account for my dev test domain. And I can say, it's Bob, and type the email and password and so on. So I don't have to log into the second domain to create a user for the second domain. I can do it from the first domain. And that is because of this cross-domain permission. So hopefully that was useful. I think multi-domain servers are really cool. They allow you to really, allow you to maximize your MeshCentral instance and make maximum use of the resources and your database and so on, and really offer a customized user experience to your customers. Hopefully that was clear. Thank you very much. Have a great day.